And is anyone
Yeah.
welcome to like chime in for the follow-up questions?
Oh yes, yes. No, once the only thing is that yeah, I'm trying to adjust my volume here. The only thing is to um, I mean, whoever is in the rotation, they just ask the question, and then if anybody has a follow-on question, just pop up and go for it.
Hey, do you mind if I ask how often they currently preach?
What?
Do you mind if I ask him how often he preaches at church?
Yeah, no, go ahead. That can be a follow-on from
Okay.
from somewhere.
Okay.
But yeah, my guess is that they these guys are. Hang on a minute, I try to adjust this. That looks good.
And also
My guess is that
after, oh,
they preach every day. I'm sorry, they preach every Sunday. They preach almost every Sunday.
okay.
That what I did was I kind of access where the church, where they are,
Okay.
and it looks like they preach often.
Oh, okay.
But
Another thing
yeah,
I
I
wanted
can
to ask.
only see half your face.
pardon me.
Hey, Mel, I can only see like half your face, only like your eyes.
Yeah, I know.
You gotta lower the.
I'm doing I'm doing something right now, so I don't have
That's
the
his.
camera on. I can't
That's
see
his
the
best
camera.
part.
I'm just trying to adjust my volume, recording volume.
Also,
You see.
after the meeting adjourns, should we just stay out? I mean, should we just kind of log on for a little bit so we can chit chat a little bit afterwards?
Yeah, I think we should
If
do
you
break.
want,
Yeah, if it's not too late, that'll be kind of nice to have a little recap and then just go over what we're going to do for next interview
if you want.
rather than having chain emails going back and forth.
Right. I think we should like record kind of our thoughts after each of
Yeah.
the.
Hey, I'm glad you could join us.
Yeah.
Hey, Donnie, where are you now?
Nathan's house upstairs. He's ready for his interview if you want to interview him.
Oh, I love that. Hi, Jimmy.
Hey,
Hey, Jimmy.
hey.
You just
Okay.
make it light.
You guys see me now?
Yes.
Do you want to fill Jimmy in on what we're doing?
Okay, yeah. Now that I got everybody here, what we're gonna do is I'm gonna moderate, and then I plan to rotate the questions, starting with me, and then Kay, you're gonna follow me, and then Jimmy, and then Melanie. Melanie. Yeah, Melanie, and then Donnie, and then we'll so forth. So what I'll do is I'll see how the answers are going and everything else, and then I might just 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 go on.
Hey.
Ah, the guest of the hour is here.
Welcome.
Nice to meet you all.
Oh, hey Timothy, Mel Wong
Hi.
here.
Hi, how are you? Nice to
You
meet you all.
pretty good. Do you prefer Timothy or
Good.
Tim?
Tim is great, thank you.
Okay, Tim. Hey, I'm glad you joined us.
Yeah, absolutely.
The people that are on there. There's Mason. Mason, wave your hand.
Hi, Mason.
Okay, and then Jimmy,
Hey Tim,
Hey, Jimmy, nice to meet you.
nice to meet you.
and then guess one. Guess one is Donnie.
Donnie? Okay.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
Nice to
and
meet you.
then there's Kay.
Hey. Hi, nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. Put a face to a voice.
Hi, Tim.
Yeah, so just be aware that that there's a big test coming up at the end.
Okay.
You're gonna have to remember who's talking to whom.
I'll do my best.
But this is just this is just really a kind of informal interview where we're trying to get to know you, and then maybe perhaps you get to know us.
Absolutely.
So we're going to be asking some questions. I'm hoping to keep even though we're clocked on to 9 o'clock. I want to try to keep it I'm gonna try to keep it within an hour. We've got 11 questions, but I know from experience that an hour is probably not enough. But we'll see how it goes. But again,
Sure.
this is just an informal interview. We want to get to know you, and then give you a chance to know us.
Absolutely.
And then at the end of the our questions, I'm gonna ask you, do you have any questions of us?
Sure.
So just so that's going to be available to you at the end.
Great.
But hey, let's start with a moment of prayer first, and then we'll start the interview.
Absolutely.
Father, how we continue to thank you for the great God that you are, and a God who a loving God who provides for us and takes care of us. And Father, at this time, I thank you for Tim being with us here. Thank you that you have called him. You have called him to be your minister, be a shepherd to the flock that you have given to him. And Father, we pray for him, and we hold him up to you. And Father, I also want to get a chance to pray for us. Father, you know that we need a pastor, and Father, as we do our search, Father, we pray for each one of us to be sensitive, and that the Holy Spirit would hold us close to Him, so that we would be, as we ask the questions, and as we listen, that we would listen with your ears. Father, thank you for this time. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Okay. Tim, are you all comfortable now?
Yes, definitely.
Okay, great. First question I'd like to ask is, hey, tell us a little bit about yourself, and tell us a little bit about your family.
Sure, absolutely. So, been married 13 years this coming August with my wife. I was born and raised in Toronto, Canada. So my parents are from South Korea. They immigrated to Toronto, Canada. So I was born and raised there. And I'm kind of, not that I wanted to, but third generation pastor. My grandfather was a pastor in Korea. He retired and moved to Toronto with my family. And then my uncle's a pastor, and then I happen to be a pastor. But yes, I was born and raised there. Grew up going to church. Was always involved in the church. But I think the biggest change that happened, the call that I received in coming into a relationship with Jesus was, you grew up in the church. I always regretted not having like that conversion experience where, I strayed and then I came back. But for me, it was actually something different. I grew up in the church, and what I was challenged with is having a knowledge of Jesus and the knowledge of the Bible and knowledge of, doing your duties versus entering into a relationship. And that really happened for me in high school. And I went all throughout the program. I went to their children's ministry, and I went to their high school ministry, junior high and high school ministry. And that's really where I came to my relationship in Jesus Christ. So born and raised there. A big part of my life growing up was music. So I got my associates at the Royal Conservative of Toronto. It's a private school, and so I got that in high school. So I started playing the piano classically since I was 7, and started growing up in that. In high school, I entered into a arts high school where I studied music and piano. But that's where I also fell in love with sports, and I started wrestling and playing rugby there, and played club rugby in that area. And then from there, after I graduated high school, I went to a university, which is about maybe 2.5, 3 hours east of Toronto. And I initially studied political science in hopes of entering into law school. But during my freshman year, I just was really challenged. The Lord was really doing a great work as I actually found myself going to the School of Music, going into those piano practice rooms and just having times of worship on my own. And so at that point, I decided to change my majors after my first year from political science to music, and I ended up actually graduating with a Bachelor of Music degree from the college. And now, while I was in college, that's really when the Lord, and I had every intention, even with the School of Music, to continue on in law school, because I was going to take my LSATs and apply to law school. But as I went through college, I was really convicted about ownership. I was away from home, away from family. I didn't have to go to church. It was, what does it mean that I'm a follower of Jesus? And what does it mean if, he is who I believe he says he is? What does it mean for me to live my life out that way? And, really I began to wrestle with my faith and really came to fruition in terms of who I was. And I was always involved in the Christian fellowship there at the university, but really I think it was a blessing to be away from home to really begin to identify, my faith in Jesus Christ. So while I was there, I really began to get involved with worship ministry as I was doing my Bachelor of Music degree, and ended up going. It's the person I followed really deeply at the time was Matt Redman. I don't know if you all know, but Matt Redman was a big part of my life, and especially really following Jesus. And so I had a chance to go to a Worship Together conference at another university, and that's really where I came to the call where I was and I'd been to Urbana. I don't know if you know, that's a mission conference every 2-3 years, but I just felt like at that worship night, and then I think it was building up, the Lord was really tugging at my heart, and it was at that time I really felt the solid call of Jesus, where I was worshiping with hundreds and thousands of other students, and said, this is what I want to do. There's nothing more. I always knew that I'd be involved with ministry, and I always thought, even as a lawyer or anything like that, that I would always be a lay leader. But at that point, that's when I believe, I don't want to do it as in addition to. This is what I believe God is calling me to. And at the time, I was a junior in college, but I just felt the calling so strongly. And that no doubt that's a direction that he was calling me, that, and it was so clear. So college as well, in my senior year, and everybody was like, "Oh, what are you doing? You're a senior now." And just felt, it's like, I'm going into ministry. And they gave me the nickname like the preacher. I wasn't preaching, but I think they're just looking for a cool nickname on the wrestling team. So and then I had a mentor who was a pastor, who had been my youth pastor, and I talked to him, and throughout that journey, and this is really concise, but in a nutshell, he mentored me throughout that journey and really helped me to discern that call. And at the time, I just said, I just feel like worship is where Lord is calling me. There's nothing more I want to do than to worship God. And he said, Tim, right now Los Angeles is the place to be for worship. And he said, and this is me in Toronto. I never lived outside of Canada. And he said, if I really encourage you to look at Los Angeles. And for some reason, as I was looking through seminaries and applying, Fuller really stood out. For no other reason than, I don't even know. I can't even say what it was, but it was like, every other seminary kind of pulled away, and Fuller Theological Seminary was the one. So in faith, I applied to Fuller, but as a backup, because we always, are human, and we always feel like we need to have a backup plan. I applied to Tyndale Seminary in Toronto as well. So I got into both seminaries. The journey to LA was, was a faith journey in and of itself as well. So that, in a nutshell, was so I was waiting on them because I already got accepted by Tyndale Seminary in Toronto, and I got an email, but I hadn't received any packages, and so I contacted the office and the registrar's office, and they said, go ahead, don't worry, start making plans. We're going to send you your package. Now, if I got in, I was supposed to start school, in September. I remember it was the beginning of August, and they still hadn't received anything. So I contacted them again, and they said, "Go ahead, don't worry. It's coming, it's coming." Finally, I think it was like 2 weeks out, and I'm like, this is almost a little ridiculous. I don't know where I'm supposed to go. I contact them, then they said, "Oh, what's your name again?" And so I gave them my name, and they said, "Oh, we sent the wrong email to the wrong person. We actually hadn't even looked at your application. It was like, oh my gosh, but I think it was a huge lesson and step for me because, I remember my struggle at the time was, God, I just want to serve you. Why can't this work out to where I want to go? But isn't that the challenge of where I want to go and being able to say, Lord, being able to release that and say where you want to go. And I think that peace, when I had that, was when it all worked out. And I said, whether I'm in Toronto, whether I'm in Los Angeles, it is exactly like I said, it is for the Lord. So what does it matter where I go? And of course, that's when everything worked out and I was able to go to Fuller. So I moved down to Los Angeles on my own and started attending Fuller Seminary in the MDiv program. Well, I came down. I checked out several different churches in the area, but the one I ended up with was United Methodist Church, the one that I'm interim pastor at now. So it's the community church in Holliston. Back then it was in Glendale. So I started and just felt like, I didn't feel denominationally bound. I just felt more, I was looking for a community where I could connect and worship with, and I felt like that was the right community. It was the pastor there. I'm still great friends with him, and was able to get involved there. Met my wife there. So she is born and bred in Los Angeles, and I'm very blessed. She was my best friend, and the Lord blessed me. I had concerns about that area of my life too, but and it all worked out. And 3 children later, we have an 8-year-old boy, a 7-year-old girl, and a 19-month boy. So and she keeps talking about another one, but I said, you know what, the Lord's going to have to speak on that one. I'm pretty tapped now, but. So I have 3 children, and it's been a wonderful journey of growth in that area as well. So from there, after I graduated from Fuller, and so on my time at Fuller, I was a children's pastor at the church that I was at. I was able to supervise a staff as a children's pastor, run multiple programs for the children, and from there, after I graduated from Fuller, I just felt like, I really felt like I wanted to target college and young adults. And so I ended up going to Orange County Young Neck Presbyterian Church as the EM pastor there. And it was a great church. It was a smaller community, but we were able to grow it and do a lot of things. And they had been around for a while. But they were really seeking some new life in their community, and it was a wonderful place. It's a Presbyterian church, and that's where I was ordained. The elders approached me and said, "We would, as a pastor here, we would love for you to be ordained, and we'd love to sponsor you." And I said, "It'd be my honor." So I went through the process, and the denomination is KPCA, which is the Korean Presbyterian Church abroad. And so I was able to get ordained there through their denomination. It was a bit challenging because it's Korean focused, so everything was in Korean. So I had to get a lot of translation and ask my mother-in-law and ask people like, what does this mean? So it was an interesting process, but it was great nonetheless, and I feel blessed by that community. Now, the reason I left that community, the senior pastor resigned, and so when that senior pastor resigned, and I still have a great relationship with the new senior pastor, but I just felt like it was a closing of a chapter, and I felt like it was a time for something new, a new opportunity. So that's when I went to Bell Memorial United Methodist Church up in Rolling Heights. And I was the EM pastor there, and it was a wonderful experience. I actually was able to minister not just to the young adult group, and be the education pastor, but they also had a older, non-Korean, multi-generational, multicultural congregation there that existed. So me being the English ministry pastor, I shepherded them as well. So that was a wonderful experience, being able to do that. And we had gone through a major building project at that church, and they went through this mega build. I mean, it was incredible. They had lights, the cross lit up in different colors. It was incredible. But I was really convicted because I remember when that church, when they finally finished the building, and everybody in that community knew, I would go around and I felt like really like we needed to be a presence in the community. I mean, it was obvious that the church had been built, and everybody saw the building, but they didn't connect with the people inside the building, and that's what really challenged me. And one day I was looking out of my office, and there's a school nearby, and students are walking by, and I was just like, what are we doing? There's this great building, and people are just walking by, and we're not, there's no impact. And I just felt a tugging in my heart that God was calling me to more of a hands-on ministry. And that's the kind of person that I am. I consider myself somebody who believes that the gospel is relevant in people's lives. I don't think Jesus is a story. I don't think it's meant to be just something out there, a metaphysical idea. I think he's relevant and he's alive today. I believe that relevance changes lives today. And so I just felt like, maybe the church parish ministry wasn't right at the time. And so from there, actually, my wife and I, we talked and we prayed, and she was the one who actually suggested, well, what about, chaplaincy? And I'd done some hospital chaplaincy while I was at Fuller as an intern. And hospital chaplaincy was just a little too sort of emotional for me. I was the chaplain in the PICU and the NICU, and saw a lot of terminal children, and it was hard for me to disassociate. So I said, hospital's a little too heavy for me. Then she was the one to say, well, what about the military? I said, well, what about the military? I don't really know too much, but I do like to work out. I at the time I was still playing rugby, and I was just like, yeah, let's see. And I got the brochures, but I'm not a brochure kind of person. I'm more of a relational people kind of person. So I just kind of put the brochures to the side. But I remember I went to the mall right next to the church, and there was a Navy recruiter's office. So I was like, I'm not going to sign anything, but we'll see what happens. So I walked in, and again, it was kind of a weird encounter. The recruiter started giving me this like weird look. I said, I'm interested in becoming a chaplain. And he said, well, really? And I was like, yeah. I said, is that wrong? Should I, and he said, well, tell me about yourself. And I told him, went to Fuller. I'm the pastor of that church that just got built. And he was like, oh, okay. So then he got really excited. And he said, you know what? I got to apologize. I didn't mean to come off really weird, but today's my first day as a chaplain recruiter. And so I thought somebody was putting you up to a joke, putting me up, and I was like, wow. That's crazy. And so he, got me really excited. And that journey and process was the same, where I said, Lord, if this is from you, it's scary. I don't know anything about it. I know deployments are involved, and, sacrifices are involved. At the time, we had our first, Joshua, my oldest, and my wife was pregnant with our second. So even thinking about, it was almost like ridiculous. Why would I leave a church that we had just gone through a major building project? But I just felt like, when the Lord calls, I have to, I have to follow. So, I said, I don't know much about the military, but, Lord, if this is you, you're going to have to fling the door wide open. And it was supposed to take approximately almost a year, but I got it done in less than 6 months. And, even the recruiter was really surprised. And, it was such an easy process that, like, it was almost like, wow, this is moving a little too fast. But it was such a blessing and joy in that. And, obviously when I told the congregation, it was sad for them to see me go, but they were encouraged in knowing that I would continue to minister. And that was an encouragement to me. I didn't tell my family, my parents, because I didn't want to, until I knew for sure that's what I was doing. But when I eventually came down to telling them, another kind of a miracle and confirmation was my parents, and I hadn't told anybody, my parents were like, you know what, we kind of heard that you were applying to the military, so we've been praying for you. I was like, what? That's great. How did you hear that? And so that was incredible. During my final interview at a Marine Corps base, I was still feeling, I was like, this is the last interview. Lord, are you sure you want me to do this? And there was another interviewee that I was going to interview with, and he came, and all I hear is somebody go, Tim? And I look around, and he was a friend of mine that I grew up with in Toronto, who I went to church with, who's also joined the military as a chaplain. I was like, wow. I mean, Lord, that was my prayer at the time. And so what a wonderful conviction and confirmation of what God was doing. So joined the military in 2011. And it has been an incredible journey of being deployed, of serving our service members. And it really, I think for me, it's allowed me to learn to minister to people out of my niche. I was so used to the Asian community, the Korean community, English-speaking community, but I think, I look back on it, and the journey allowed me to go from, a second generational ministry in my first church to, Bell Memorial, which had the multicultural, multi-generational church, a congregation which was small, but prepared me for the military where, it is all people of all types and backgrounds, people who are believers, non-believers, and really it's living very missionally, and because you literally wear the cross on one side of your collar, and you live with these sailors and Marines and Coast Guardsmen, and it's not just the services that you put on, it's the witness that you bear as you live and do life with them, and I think that's really taught me a lot. From there, I done a deployment. I was on a station on a ship down in San Diego. We deployed in support of Operation Enduring Freedom. I was gone for about almost 8 months, about 7 months. Came back, and then we moved right away up to Northern California to Petaluma, to the Coast Guard base there, as the command chaplain. And we did the move. And as we were getting ready to make another move, we had our third child at the time, and my wife Monica and I were just saying, I hate moving. I just, and there's no guarantee in the military that you're going to stay in the same geographical area. And, I talked to the assignment detailer, and he said, I can't guarantee where you're going to go. And so we made the difficult decision to say, you know what, I want to continue on in this ministry as a reservist, but I just think that it's time to leave active duty. So was able to do that, and so kind of this is where I'm at now, back in Los Angeles, kind of seeking out what God is doing. When I left active duty, I said, Lord, I just don't want to be the stay-at-home dad. And lo and behold, the Lord is stretching me again, where I feel like I'm part stay-at-home dad. But it's been joyful. I'm not trying, but I think I am embracing it. Because the flexibility of schedule and the time really allows me to be able to stay at home, spend time with my children, spend time with my family, and enjoy this time. So it's kind of, in a nutshell, that's been my journey.
That's quite a journey.
Yeah.
I take it then your wife is working?
Yes, she is. She's working part-time. She's a nurse. So she is a school nurse. So she worked for LAUSD. When we were up north, she worked for Katahdin Ornament Park School District, and now she's back here. She works for another school district as well.
Okay, and then one other thing before we go on to the next question. When you thought that you had a calling for the ministry,
Yes.
did you get affirmation from anybody
Yes,
about your
yes,
calling?
absolutely. Yes, so my mentor, Pastor, was definitely the one who encouraged me through that. When I told him, he was definitely, it was almost like he had been waiting for me to, what's the right word, to hear that call. My family, both my parents, were incredibly, my dad. So actually, I felt like I might be going into ministry. This is as I was going into college. My dad, being a pastor's kid, said, "Well, I guess you're not getting married or having kids." I was like, "What? I'm not trying to become a priest." And he's like, "No, it's a hard life. Are you sure you want to do that?" But back, for when my grandfather was a pastor, it was right during the Korean War, and there was a lot of sacrifices they made. I told him, it's not like that. So with my youth pastor at the time, my mentor, and my youth group, and my parents, they were able to see that. So when I actually told him when I received the call in college, my parents were like, "Yeah, absolutely." I mean, and that was for me was exciting to be able to, because I was worried, like my dad would say, "Don't get married again." I was like, sorry, but being married is definitely on my list. So yeah.
Okay, great, thank you. Kay, you
Yeah.
want to ask? You want to go on to the next one?
Yeah. Well, that's only second question. We only have an hour, so I'm just going to be
No,
direct with you. You
yeah,
briefly
don't worry
mentioned about
about
your
it.
wife.
Yeah.
Okay. It seems like she's already very involved in your ministry. So how does she feel about you being a pastor? And also, how do you picture her being involved in your ministry?
Oh, great question. She's always been, unfortunately, I think, fortunately or unfortunately, I think it's not just the pastor's individual calling. I think it's a family calling. And I think it's something that in every situation I've always discussed things with my wife. I think she's always been a part of it. And my wife, hoping that one day you'll meet her, but she has a heart for women's ministry. So she, even when I was in the military, she always got together with the military spouses. When we were at the Coast Guard base, she had a regular weekly women's small group, and she did prayer meetings. And so she is my support, but she's also a fellow partner in ministry. I think without her, I couldn't do anything. She balances me, and she allows me to bring such a fuller ministry that I could never do on my own, obviously because I'm a male, and she has that heart for women, and so she definitely balances me out. I think she, I know that in the beginning, back when when we were getting married, I know that she knowing that my path was ministry, it's definitely, I don't know how exciting somebody can be like, oh yeah, I'm about to marry a pastor, but over the years, I think because I was starting my full-time ministry journey as we got married, it's allowed us to really grow and learn and be stretched. And so I think wherever we go, whatever ministry we do, or even right now, so I'm an interim pastor, which is I'm helping them out Sundays with worship and speaking once a month. But she's already integrated in, and she's started on her own. She's doing her small group, women's small group, once a week. Tonight she has they're going to a Christian concert, I guess, or something, worship night with the ladies. So they have that going on. So much like me, I think she and I both have the same heart where we feel like ministry is very relevant and relational. And I think, she'll always be a part of that, no matter what I do.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
The right now you are you are only an interim pastor at
Yes.
At the community church.
Yes.
Is that still a Korean church?
Yeah. So it's similar to Bell Memorial, where it's a Korean church, but they have non-Korean congregation as well as the second generation English ministry. So they have a 9:30. They call it the Heritage Ministry, which are mostly the traditional people that were there from before, the non-second gen people, and some of the and obviously some second geners that want to come. And then the 11 o'clock is really the contemporary second gen ministry.
So are you then the English ministry pastor then, or
No,
is
no,
it separate?
no. Yeah, there's an EM pastor. So right now, as the interim pastor, I'm just helping. They needed so they about last summer. So right before I came, they let their associate pastor go, and so they didn't. They weren't in a place where they could hire us an associate pastor. And at the time, I was coming back, and I happened to visit, and he said, "Hey, I could really use your help, and we really need help in these areas." And I said, "You know what? As of right now, I don't have anything going on." So they know that I'm interviewing at other positions and jobs, but I'm helping right now. That's my community to be able to help out in the capacity that they need.
Okay, yeah, that clarifies a lot. Hey Jimmy, Tim's already answered question 3. Go to 4.
Okay. So question 4, how did you find out about the senior pastor position with our church?
Yeah, so actually it was from a friend of mine who I served with at the Coast Guard base, Hannah Kawamoto. I served, so I was the command chaplain there when they came on, or she came on to the base. Immediately we connected, her looking for a fellowship, an officer Christian fellowship. We didn't have one, but I told her about what we had on base and the resources, and so it really allowed us to connect. And at the time she was pregnant, and so we were able to invite her and her husband, Robin, and invite them over to our house. And like I said, my wife loves to host and loves to connect with people. She loves connecting with people and hosting, and so we're able to connect with them. And she, knowing my journey, I had talked to her quite a bit, her and her family, Robin, and told them when we were leaving active duty, and we've been praying for each other. And so I think she said, "Hey, the old church I used to go to is looking for a senior pastor. I think he'd be great." And I was like, "Yeah, that sounds great." And actually, so a friend of mine is a covenant pastor as well. Mike Park. He's in Hope West Side, which is part of the Hope churches in New York. And so he was excited. He's like, "Hey, Covenant is a great denomination." I was like, "Oh, okay, that sounds good." So, that's kind of how it all fell together.
Cool. Thanks.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thanks. Let's see, Melanie. Let's go to number 6.
So, can you tell us what is your passion as a pastor?
hmm What's my passion as a pastor? I think, gosh, there's so many. The most exciting thing for me is when people have an encounter with Christ. I think that's when lives are changed. I think of John chapter 4, the woman at the well, the Samaritan woman. We all have different backgrounds. We all have challenges. We all face different things and struggle with different things. But when we have an encounter with Christ, it changes us. It's like, you've met somebody and you can't get them out of your mind. And to me, that's so exciting when I can see that, be a part of that, or allow an atmosphere where somebody encounters Christ and can encounter Christ. And then, and I think sometimes, we stray, we forget, we get into the routine of life. But when you have that moment where it's like, where Christ comes and encounters you and says, like Paul, and is walking and just when Christ comes, it's like that change happens. For me, that's exciting. For me, worship is always a big part of that, because I'm a music guy. So I love, I love music. I love being able to come together and just have that change. Being on missions, going to somebody and having them accept Christ in that encounter gets me excited. And when I see people see that Christ is alive and relevant, that gets me excited. And that's what I think I drive for is like, Christ is alive and relevant today. I was telling somebody this actually. I think it's so incredible. How long has Christianity, this faith existed and gone through the test not only of time but of everything. Like we have technology today and Facebook today, and we're updating the definitions of everything. Yet Christ still speaks. That's like, isn't that, to me, that's incredible. Christ, the Bible is still relevant today, no matter what time and change happens. And I think, that gets me excited. And that's my passion, is for people to see that Christ, he's relevant. And yeah, so.
Okay, great. Hey, thank you, Tim.
Yeah.
Donnie, why don't you handle the next question?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. Oh, by the way, I just wanted to say that I ran into Hannah and Robin
Oh, good.
like a week or two ago. And they
Okay.
said really nice things about you, and they're expecting their second
Yeah.
maybe next month.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
so
That's awesome. Awesome. Oh, that's great.
very exciting. And they're in Petaluma now, from what I
Yes,
heard.
yes,
So,
that's right. Yes.
all right. So I got a 4-part question.
A 4-part question. Oh, you're breaking up as you said that.
Just so take notes here. Okay. Just take notes if you miss any of them,
Okay.
or ask again. So, what is a pastor's primary responsibility? What are your other responsibilities? Where do you think your strengths and weaknesses lie? And what do you think your spiritual gifts are?
That's a loaded question.
Okay. That's a big. Okay. Okay. So what do I believe is a pastor's? I wrote a little bit of pastor's primary
Primary
responsibility.
responsibility. Yeah. Well,
Okay.
don't worry about Tim. I'll give you hints.
Okay. No problem. Well, I'll tell you this. I think the pastor's, especially the senior pastor's primary responsibility is to cast the vision that the Lord has placed for that community. I think not only to cast the vision, but to allow people to enter into that vision, I think together. I think the pastor has such a huge responsibility in bringing that people into being responsible for those people. Being a pastor is shepherding, and I think of a shepherd who leads the people. If the shepherd doesn't know where they're going, the whole flock's getting lost. And I think as a pastor, it's really to seek out the vision that the Lord has for that community and being able to lead the people into that community. And I think that is probably one of the most important visions I think that a pastor has as a primary responsibility. Other responsibilities,
Right.
yeah, I think all of that comes from that vision that the pastor receives from the Lord, meaning such as I could rattle off everything from counseling to supervising to discipling to mentoring to teaching to praying to spiritual disciplines. I mean, all of these facets I think are great, but just listing them in and of itself are nothing. But when they come in line with the vision that the Lord has, it becomes very an incredible force. And I think that's really a part of it. To pray, to do the spiritual disciplines, to teach, to counsel. Based on that vision, really on what the Lord has given that pastor and that community, I think is part of that responsibility. Whether it's also any variety of levels of discipleship, mentoring, and counseling, because it can come from staff. If as an EM pastor, for me, I was also the education pastor, and I had a youth pastor, I had a junior high pastor, I had a children's pastor. For me, I felt it was my responsibility to make sure that we were all on the same page, so that we can go in the same direction, and to make sure we're on that page together, so that it's not like we have sporadic different departments, but that we're on that and really be able to test that. Like, is this what God is calling us to? I think that's a big part of it. And again, to teach that, being able to teach it is to the congregation is important, because it's not just, I don't think you're just preaching whatever you want week to week. But for me, I really believe in preaching in series, because I believe the Lord is trying to say something. And sometimes there are those one-offs where definitely you allow for that. But I think definitely some of the other responsibilities include that, supervision, administrative skills, obviously, but at the same time, doing it with the vision that God has given you, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. How about strengths and weaknesses?
Strengths and weaknesses. Yeah, that's good. Well, strength. Obviously, music and worship is a big part of it for me. Creating worship atmosphere is a big part. I think another strength that I have is counseling. I think in the military that's really come in line with that strength, because as a chaplain, I counsel people of all backgrounds, and they don't have to be believers, and that's really allowed me to refine that gift. So I definitely say counseling is another one. Preaching. Actually, one of the things I forgot to mention. So I came to LA to become a worship pastor, but while I was at the church in Glendale at the time, and now Halston, the senior pastor, the EM pastor there, who was also kind of watching over mentoring me, he really recommended. He said, you're great at worship, but I just think that the Lord has really blessed you with with preaching, and I think that might be something you want to explore. And so it was a process for me as well to go through that, and that's really been an exciting part of my life to be able to preach. And so as an interim pastor right now, for example, at this church, I lead worship on most of the Sundays, and once a month I preach for them. And it's kind of like, it's, I get to do my strengths. So it's been really fun. But I definitely would say that the counseling, the preaching, and the music. And I think also just the hands-on, meeting people. I really love to get to know people. I love like just meeting with people, and I think that's a big part of my strength. In terms of weaknesses, I can definitely say two things. One is I think I stress a lot. I don't know why, but I overstress and overthink a lot of things. So for example, after this interview, I'll be praying a lot. Just kidding, but no, I tend to overthink things a lot, and that can be challenging. But thankfully, my wife is not. So she's kind of like, yeah, let's do it and move forward. So she, like I said, she bounces me out. The Lord has really blessed me with her. But that's probably one thing I overstress and overthink a lot sometimes. And that's definitely something my wife has allowed me to work through, and the military too, because sometimes you don't have time to overthink. You just got to do it, and so it's taught me a lot. Another one, I'd probably say the challenge, I wouldn't say so much a weakness, is administratively, do I do it? Absolutely, I have to, especially in the military. I think administration and making sure everything is balanced out is important, and you do that. But I'll definitely say it doesn't give me joy to do admin, but I do it. And the last thing I think was spiritual gifts. Is that right?
Yeah, normally, there are, I think there were seven spiritual gifts. I think so.
Hmm.
I forgot. But what is what do you feel your primary spiritual gift is?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
then, along with that primary, do you feel that you have other spiritual gifts there that approaches your primary?
Yeah, I think for me, definitely like worship is definitely one of them. I think worship and encouragement. If I might say, like words of affirmation, are something that definitely I is a part of who I am. Um, but I think with all that I do, whether it's in meeting with people, that obviously gives me the opportunity to practice that gift of encouraging people, and using words of affirmation. As a chaplain, as a pastor, it really enables me to be in that. I think I'm the kind of person. So I wouldn't say I'm prophetic. I think sometimes I have perspective, I like to say, and I think just being able to I think when I'm connecting with the Lord and being able to, I guess it's more of like a vision thing, where I'm able to have that perspective on a situation. And I think that is in line with counseling, because, when people come, you don't, with all the tools that you have, you just never know what kind of issues you're going to face. And so when somebody comes and they lay before you whatever issue or struggle that they have, I think that vision casting, or that perspective that the Lord allows me to have, allows me to be able to speak into someone's life. And again, that's, to me, I think is a strength, a spiritual gift that the Lord has blessed me with.
Great, thank you. If I known that one of your weaknesses was stress, I would have at the beginning I would say this is also a low key interview. Anyway,
You know,
Kay, would you take the next question, please?
Sure. How is the pastor held accountable? We have another, well, it's not four-part, but it's two-part.
okay.
And what relationship in your life currently provide accountability for responsible attitudes and
Hmm.
behaviors, both personally and as a pastor?
Okay, great. That's a great question. I think first and foremost, my wife. There's nothing she doesn't know about me. Nothing I ever hide about her, things with her. So she definitely, and she can definitely tell, when something's not right, or I'm struggling with something, or I'm dealing with something, or if I need to be called out on something. She definitely helps balance that out. But I also have friends who are pastors. Actually, many of them I use as references, specifically Sam Park, Mike Park, and Minho Chung, and Bill Gibbons. But Sam Park, Mike Park, and Minho are pastors in ministry. Mike is the pastor at Hope Westside. Sam is the pastor that I'm interim pastor now, and Minho is a pastor in Atlanta. But all great friends. Minho, Mike, and I went to Fuller together, and we graduated together, went into ministry together, and we were in California, in Southern California together, and we've gone on different ways and incredible journeys. But we call each other probably once a week, and ask how each other's doing. And it's cool because we all have such different, diverse experiences that we're facing, and going through. But those three brothers of mine definitely help keep me accountable, ask the hard questions that need to be asked, and vice versa. We pray for each other. Our wives all know each other, so it's great to be able to have that friendship and network kind of across the country as well. But yeah, I'd say in terms of accountability and attitude and our behavior, definitely my wife and those three friends, and then in a church. I think for a pastor, he definitely should be held accountable to some of his teaching and actions by the leadership board, elder board, deacon board, what have you, whatever is set up and established there. I think that's there, not to go against the vision, but to, if something is definitely not right, to be able to, discuss with the pastor and, and go through that together, I think is important.
Okay, great. Thank you. Jimmy, you want to take the next one, please?
Sure. So, what are some of the most important ideas and practices that you think cultivate a strong spiritual health in a local church?
Ideas and practices that culture.
Yeah, that you think cultivate a strong spiritual health in a local church.
Okay. Great. Yeah. I think definitely spiritual disciplines is the big thing. I think not the discipline to do the discipline in and of itself, but I think the heart behind it. If people are not practicing, spiritual disciplines, I think something is not right. I think also small groups are important because that's really where you start connecting with people and you're authentic with people and you're open with people and honest. And I think a church that is discipling and not just the pastor but the leaders and the lay leaders and trickling down like I said as such to the small group, I think can really help a church to grow and to cultivate that spiritual health because really spiritual health, I mean, it's not like you go to a doctor, it's really in being honest with ourselves and being able to be honest with each other. And I think that honesty covered in grace and the love of Jesus Christ can allow for people to grow. And that's where I think discipling and mentoring is especially effective because as you begin to build that trust and friendship, and you're able to enter into that kind of a relationship. And so I guess it's purposeful relationships. People who just meet to hang out, it's great, but there's no, real growth. But I think people who are able to mentor and disciple and help each other grow, like purposeful meetings, I don't call it strategic, but purposeful relationships where you meet to say, hey, I'm really gonna ask you how your spiritual life is going, or hey, what's going on, and what's preventing you, what's a challenge in you. I think that's important. And so, yeah, definitely, I would say, small groups and purposeful relationships, I would say, is a big part of that. I also say one of the things I said was creating an encounter where you can have an encounter with Jesus Christ. And I think having a place where it's not just about the place, but having a fellowship or community where they're open to, how God will be leading, I think is important. I think attitude is important because sometimes, I think this is a challenge in a lot of second generation ministries where, growing, especially if they've grown up in the church, there's a lot of kind of lack of ownership where they say, hey, I grew up in the church, I know what to expect. But I think when we know what to expect, we kind of push the Holy Spirit out. But if we come with a heart to not knowing what to expect, I think that's when God can do miracles. And I think really the community that is prepared to do that, and again, not everybody's going to do that, but you have different levels of community in a church, and that community, that leadership, or that core that has that expectation to say, hey, God, like, I don't know what you're going to do. I don't know what today's going to look like. I know in my mind how the format should be, but Lord, just do something crazy. I think that's a church that can really begin to grow in their spiritual health.
Cool, thanks.
Great, thank you. You talked about discipleship and mentoring.
Yes.
have you ever been in a situation where you had to grow leadership? In other
Oh,
words, you had to grow leaders.
I had to grow leaders. I definitely, I think, let's see, whether well, specifically in the church, definitely staff. As the EM pastor, when I think in a Korean church they automatically make you the education pastor as well, and so you have the youth staff and the junior high staff and the children's pastor, and I think um, even on a step in a different level beyond that is also the volunteers and the teachers that are willing to be a part of that staff. So in that situation, I have, and it's you know it's really for me the growth happens meeting them in the maturity that they're at. So, for example, if you're coming on staff as a pastor, as a youth pastor, or what have you, I expect definitely more maturity, spiritual maturity, than someone who may be a lay leader, for example. Just because if you're deciding to be, a leader in that capacity as a even, yeah, you're not an ordained pastor, but you're a youth pastor, you're a director or whatever you want to call that. Definitely have different expectations there. So for me to stretch somebody, I'll stretch them. I would disciple them or expect them to grow or to be growing in their faith and working on their faith in a different level than somebody who might be a volunteer teacher, if that makes sense. But I don't think it has to stop. I think as volunteer teachers, for example, they have different things that they should be doing and growing as well. Because to me, that's a step. It's not just a role, but it's a step in their faith. If you're a volunteer teacher, that means you're willing to grow in some capacity. You want to. You have that openness in your heart, and so really, to me, that's an opportunity for them to grow even further. And then if they can continue to grow and then have them disciple people in their outer circles, it can have even a greater effect as well.
Great. You also talk about ownership of the church.
Yes.
Um, you have any ideas on how to develop ownership of a church?
Ooh, that's hard.
Yes, I know.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I think it comes. I think it comes with that vision casting that I said. I think the pastor that casts a vision, where say, and it doesn't have to be so specific, but something that where the leaders, the core leaders, and the pastor are in line with and say, this is what we believe our church is called to be. I think it starts from there. I think the problem is, unfortunately, in this day and age, people see membership at a church as more of an association or part of an organization or community versus being a part of a vision that has a community that has a vision. And I think that's really where ownership begins to start, where they'll say, yeah, this vision is not the vision that the pastor has or the church has, but this is our vision, my vision, what we believe in. I think once people begin to see that, they can. I think as people, and I think it also happens when pastors, or sometimes pastors can try to, especially in smaller churches, try to do too much. But I think in delegating and saying, hey, can you do this? People begin to step up, say, hey, you know what, I do want to do that. I do want to do that for the church. I do want to do that for the community. And they begin to say, hey, like they begin to see what this vision is about and what to take on that leadership role. But it's a struggle because I think work and everything else is Monday to Friday, if not to Saturday, and church unfortunately is once or twice a week, and but that's not it. But that's the thing, when people see church as a check mark in the box, ownership is very difficult. But when they see that church is the community that I'm a part of, it changes things. I think of it as a family. Sometimes, as a family, sometimes you're at work more than you're with your family, but that doesn't mean I say, oh, well, I just go to my family and I clock in, I clock out. No, I think of my family when I'm not with them. When I'm at work, I think of them. Just because I don't have my ring on doesn't mean I'm not married. My wife is on my heart all the time because, this is my family. This is who I'm a part of. This is for my family. And I think a community that can kind of have that same attitude can begin to take on ownership. But it's a challenge because I think there are so many things that prevent us from having ownership. But yeah, if that makes sense. Oh,
Yeah, I think we will.
sure. Oh, sure. So actually, that was one of my questions. What would you, so if you don't mind me asking a question, so if you were to describe that your community, what would it be like, you know? So for me, it's hard because, you know, until I'm there, it's hard to see, you know, the kind of community that it is. But for you, how would you describe like the community that you know, you all are a part of right now? Right, right. Mm, yeah, right. Hmm. Right. Right, right, right. Awesome. Well, I'll tell you this. You know, working at for example, the Coast Guard chapel, and it wasn't very big, and there wasn't much of a staff. We had a church assistant or a secretary, but really, my wife ran the children's ministry and the women's ministry. And this is on base. This is at the Coast Guard base. And you know, I obviously ran the worship and the teaching, discipleship, and the small groups. But it was interesting. I don't know if you've ever been there to the Coast Guard base, but we have a chapel on base. But the people, so they all work there, but they also live there on the base. So it's a really weird. It's like I feel like it's like old school community. You know, it's a town where people, you know, work there, they live there, they go to church there. There's a movie theater there. There's a bowling alley there. It's like really, it's a really unique situation. Um, and you know, it wasn't, you know, I wouldn't say the church service was very big, but the community, you know, was definitely there. And I think that's where things can change. I think when church districts look a little too inward to themselves, it can uh, I think it can stunt the growth because you just keep looking inward. I think a church that reaches out beyond the walls to the community can begin to reach the community, and people begin to see that the vision is not just limited to, you know, the walls, but something even greater. Um, you know, sometimes you know, a smaller church has opportunities. I'm not going to say it's not difficult, especially, and I think regardless of the size of the church, I think that what you said there, Mason, is true. Is like, you know, 5% serve the 90%, 95%, unfortunately, and they get used over and over and over again. Next, thing you know, they get burnt out and they want to leave. You know, so I think first of all, taking care of that core is so important because well, they're the ones who have been through it all. And they're the ones who are committed. But I think identifying the type of people that are there is important. I think in a small church, you know, you can't do obviously big and crazy things. But you can do things that reach the outer layer of people. I mean, if you can think of it as concentric circles almost, where you have a core group and then you have the people and the community and the crowd that constantly circle around it. There are different people at different stages of commitment to a church. And so I think identifying that kind of community, those communities, and specifically having vision and programs. I don't know, programs are such a functional word. I mean, having ministries that would allow people to feel comfortable committing more to the vision, seeing the reality of the vision, I think can grow and develop that. But it's I think larger communities have their challenges as well. Definitely like being spread thin is definitely one of those things I've experienced being part of a larger church, doing everything at a larger scale and feeling completely burnt out. So sometimes that's a possibility as well. So it's I think identifying those communities is going to be important. And once you identify those communities, like why are the people in those communities? You begin to take a look at it. And I think the pastor can't do it himself. I think it's important for the pastor to connect with those core leaders. And I guess my question also, another one I had for you all is there a leadership or a deacon board or in the United Methodist Church, they call it SPRC. Is there something like that established at MACC? Right, right, right. Okay, right. Wow, wow. Yeah, 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 yeah.
25 years, Mason.
Amen. Wow, wow. Right, right, right.
Um, yeah, I know. I got bounced out because I asked questions that weren't on the sheet. Mason, do you want to take the last question, please?
Right. So the question is, would I live in the community, meaning in that Marin County?
Well, we
Yeah,
live. Yeah, our church is in San Rafael, so it would be living in. Let's see, you're familiar with Petaluma,
I am.
but um, we're our church has always met in San Rafael, but it's always met in the Terralinda area of San Rafael, which is north of San Rafael and which is
Okay.
just south of Novato.
Yes. Okay.
Okay, so that's kind of where we're situated at.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I would definitely. I mean, I guess definitely live in the area. I mean, I would have to look at housing and things like that, and schooling for my kids and stuff like that. So, I mean, they used to go to school in Petaluma, so I don't know if we'd go right back, but it was a Spanish immersion school, and so they'd probably go back to that, I'm assuming. But we're open. We're not. Right now we're staying at a place. My mother-in-law has a property, so we're staying there right now. Just waiting to see what the Lord has. So we have, we're staying at a place right now. So I guess in short, yeah, I would definitely want to live in the community or as close as I can to the community. As what I mean, I wouldn't want to commute like crazy, but I'm familiar with Petaluma, Novato, where Robin and Hannah used to live. I'm definitely familiar with that area, and I know it can be expensive. So we would have to definitely take a look, but I don't know if housing be an issue? I guess it depends on what we want to do. My wife obviously works. She's working part-time right now, and we'd like to keep it that way only because of the schedule that she has with the kids and everything. But we would definitely see. Yeah, so I don't know if that kind of answers your question, but yeah, I'd want to live in the community if that, but how that would be would depend on um, my family, with the kids and everything.
Okay, great. Before we ask Tim to give us questions, does anybody else in the committee have any questions that any follow-on questions that they might want to ask Tim?
Actually, I do. Tim, you mentioned that you're currently preaching once a month
Yes.
and that you do enjoy preaching. Would it be a stress for you if you had to preach every Sunday or at least 3 Sundays a month? Or would that be
Oh
something that
no.
you'd be looking forward to?
Yeah, that definitely something what I'd look forward to. I did that as a EM pastor, children's pastor, and then in the military when I was at the Coast Guard base, I just preached every Sunday. So I actually at the Coast Guard base, so when they didn't have volunteers to lead worship, I led worship. So I'd go from leading worship, put the guitar down, and go right to the pulpit. So yeah, it'd be no problem. To be honest, as much as I enjoy preaching once a month, I actually enjoy preaching on a more regular basis because I believe that I like preaching in series, and I think something can be said in preaching, 4 to 6 weeks, because you're not just saying a one week thing. You're kind of going through a series together or journey together.
Thank you.
Great. Anybody else?
Hey, so Tim,
Tim?
this is Jimmy. So you mentioned worship. Like, what kind of music are you playing in worship? Like, what kind of
Yeah.
songs right now are you playing?
Absolutely. So I'm really into like elevation worship, Hillsong. So I've been teaching like the "Here as in Heaven," "Come to the Altar," "This is Amazing Grace," "Who You Say I Am," things like that. So I like to stay on top of it as much as possible if I can. But yeah, right now I'm really into elevation worship, big time. I just think they have a great vision and heart. But yeah. Now that's if I can. So right now, so the band can get pretty big. We have multiple volunteers for the worship team. So when I have a full band, which is drums, electric, bass, acoustic, keyboard, and two backups, then we can do. I like to do like a full set with elevation worship and throw in a little bit of Hillsong here and there. But yeah.
Cool.
When you say elevation,
Oh, you know what? I do.
Makes me happy. So I'm all for that.
Hillsong,
All for Hillsong.
the older congregation that I have right now, they're the United at the United Methodist Church. They really like hymn. So I've been putting one hymn, but I rearranged the hymn to make it relevant. So I still do it. I did.
yeah. Well, you're talking about the old classical problem again. From hymns to the new songs. When you say elevation, can you define that, please?
Oh, elevation worship.
Yeah,
Oh, that's the band. That's the name of the band.
that's the name. Oh, you mean there's a
Yeah.
band group called Elevation?
Yeah, elevation, or there's a church, right? Yeah, called elevation worship.
Oh, all right. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That's fine because
Yeah. Okay.
because the type of music that you were talking about is what I'm more interested in when the name.
Oh yeah, the type of yeah. So it's
Yeah.
some of their songs are like "Here as in Heaven."
Yeah.
Oh, Come
No.
to the Altar.
Yeah. This is what our Mike Wang's our worship director, and these are the songs he's using. So
Okay.
there's no problem. Anybody else? Before I turn the floor over to Tim. Tim, you got it. Ask us.
Well, yeah, no, absolutely. Well, before I did want to clarify. I don't know if so. I wrote in my resume that I'm in my email as well that I'm currently still a reservist. I don't know if you all are familiar with the reservist.
Yeah, you meet once a month, right?
Right. So for me, that was definitely one of the things I wanted to bring up. So once a month, one weekend a month, I'm still part of the Navy Reserve as a chaplain. So one weekend a month. Right now I'm part of a Marine Corps artillery unit, and so I do that. It's called drilling. I drill with them, and then in the summer for 2 weeks I'm with them doing activities. So, but that's and then if anything else comes up, but that'd be obviously discussed. But right now that's my responsibility to them. For me, I think to me it's an opportunity for a church also, because I think to extend the ministry not beyond the local community to the community that I'm part of. Because there's also right now I'm part of the community the Marines down in Seal Beach, but I know that there are Marines up in Alameda, I think, as well. So I don't know if that would be a possibility for me to move eventually, but anyway, but that responsibility is something that I still feel called to be a part of. It's something that I think allows me to continue to grow and stretch, and definitely wanted to let you know and be aware of that, as I continue on with you all as well.
How long do you think you want to be a reservist?
Until the Lord calls me out elsewhere. But I think right now it's been a good balance where I'm not there, all the time, and I'm there only, 1 weekend a month. But it allows me to, I think, be a fuller person and pastor because I'm still a chaplain with them, and it really keeps me in that perspective, that global perspective in mind, especially when it comes to, again, with the Marines. I'm doing crisis counseling, crisis response, doing Sunday services with them. So, before I came, there's not too many Navy Reserve chaplains out there. And so they didn't have, on Sundays, the believers had no Sunday service. So since I joined them, every Sunday, we have a Sunday service. And it's been really good. People are coming, officers and enlisted alike, and I think they've been looking forward to having a chaplain. And for me, I think that's a big part of what I believe God has called me to as well.
Great, thank you for telling us.
Yeah.
What else?
So I guess for me, if you could think of your community, what are a few words? I know Mason was talking briefly about it, but what are a few words you would use to describe that the community that you guys have right now at MACC?
I'll take it on before I get kicked out again. Multi-generational.
Okay.
We started as a church for English-speaking Chinese.
Okay.
So when I say English-speaking Chinese, back when the church got started, there was the ABCs and the OBCs, American-born Chinese, overseas-born Chinese. It's the same problem in Korean churches.
Yeah.
That I think that they have right now. So the ministry at that time was with English-speaking American-born Chinese. Since that time, we've expanded it to include American-born, English-speaking Asians.
Mm-hmm.
So we got Chinese ethnicity, Korean ethnicity, Filipino. I mean, we got the whole gamut, plus a few Caucasians thrown in. So that's kind of and when I say multi-generational, we're talking about people that are in their 70s and 80s,
Okay.
down to young families like Melanie. So I won't ask your age, Melanie. So, but we're talking about the low 30s at least. So yeah, I mean, we're looking at that age gap.
Mm-hmm.
Then in terms of kids, we got. Correct me if I'm wrong, Kay. Or why don't you fill Tim in on the kids number?
Let's see. We have youth group meeting every Friday, and the numbers consist of about 12 to 15 kids. It varies, depends on the season, and they do meet pretty regularly, and the attendance is pretty solid. And on Sundays, we do have a children ministry, and the numbers vary from 20 to 30s. And we do have a women's group, we have men's group, and yeah, all volunteers. And there's
Right.
only
Wow.
one paid staff,
Wow.
and that's the pastor.
So
I see.
normally we have an average of attendance, roughly an average attendance of about 70 on a
Hmm.
Sunday. Um, prior to I'm gonna try. It's a rough about 10 years ago before our previous pastor. Um, the numbers were in their say 20 to 25, but the age, it was an older generation church at that time.
I see.
Uh, the church started about 37 years ago, and actually what happened was that the people that started the church grew the church and grew over the church. You know, so it's
Mm.
very hard for the older, after 37 years, it was very hard for the older generation to really attract the younger generation.
Right.
With our last pastor, we've have managed that achievement. So that's the reason why I say it's multi-generational.
Hmm.
However, with that, again comes this problem: is that we need, Mason told you what the leadership team, or what the leaders are like. It's a leadership team, but basically, we need to be able to grow the new leaders,
Hmm.
the younger people coming up. We need to grow them into leaders. I mean, not just to take care of programs, but into the elder, the Titus Timothy elder,
Right. Right.
leader type. Um, and, and then along with that, we, again, and my wife talk about it all the time, is that with the newer people coming in, we need to establish ownership of the church.
Mm.
Basically when the church got started 37 years ago, the ownership was there.
Hmm.
The people that started it owned the church and they stuck
Right.
with it.
Right.
It's a little bit harder now, and I really think it's just a culture thing. It's just what's happening now
Hmm.
with the
Hmm.
church in general. So that's coming from me.
Okay.
But that kind of describes the church. What we have.
Okay.
Something else?
So, what would you say is one of the so some of the strengths that you do have that your community does have?
Um, okay, I'll answer it since I want to get going. Um, the rest of you guys interrupt me, okay? I think one of the strengths that
Oh,
I
somebody
think
just
one of
left.
the
Oh,
Uh-huh.
oh, who did I get kicked out again?
no, it's
Oh,
somebody
Donnie
else.
just left.
He's like, yeah,
Donnie
I'm
just
gone.
left. But I think one of the major strengths is um, I think the warmth of of um, the warmth of the people there in the church. Uh, we have strangers come in and they say, "Wow, God, you guys, oh, Donnie's back." I mean,
Yes.
you guys are really great, and I think that's one of the things that really keeps the people coming.
Right.
That I think that's our major strength. Agreed, guys? Some timid yes there, Tim.
Yeah. Um, well, let me
Among
ask
other
you.
things.
Yes. Oh, go ahead.
No, said among other things.
Oh,
So
yeah.
we don't need to elaborate.
Well, one of the things, one question has, what's been one difficult thing that your community has had to face, and how has the community dealt with that?
Oh, um, yes. Well, I yeah, I'm trying to phrase it, Tim. We went through a real difficult phase, but um, I, I, I think I want to hold off on speaking about that right
Okay.
now.
Okay.
Until if it looks like we're going to establish more of a closer relationship,
Sure. I respect
then
that.
I think that it's only fair uh, to relay that phase to you. But other
Absolutely.
than that, yeah, other than you guys, the rest of you guys know what I'm talking about. But can you think of anything else where um, I, I really can't think of anything else where the church has had a real big problem.
Well,
Is that
I wouldn't say it was a big problem, but as you mentioned, our church, there's a lot of age gap between, the founders of the church in their 70s and 80s, and now we
Hmm.
have a lot of young comers, young adults and young parents and some middle-aged parents, and we're all in a similar um, phase in life, parenting.
Hmm.
Our kids' age varies, but then we're all parenting, and that's something that we kind of equalizes everything.
Right.
And there's definitely compartmentalized areas because obviously there had been previous relationship with among thick folks who's been here for decades versus
Right.
people who are new to church.
Right.
And it's
Right.
kind of hard to bridge that gap.
Hmm.
And I think it's great that a lot of the people stepped up and they made an effort to create events and fellowships so we get to know each other a little bit more.
Right.
So within church, there has been a lot of outreach. And I
Okay.
think with an open communication, a sensing what we like and talking to each other intimately and really intentionally making effort to reach out and talk to each other and how we could be there for each other because it is a small community. There are a
Hmm.
lot of the families where kids play outside of the church, they have play dates, and they go to
Hmm.
same school, same
Right.
activities, same VBS. And
Right.
so although our age may vary, some people in their 20s, some people in their 30s and 40s, but we're all parenting. And it was really important for us to kind of be each other's support, keep each other accountable. And it
Right.
was nice to have a few people that step up and kind of reach out and really make an effort to kind of bridge that gap. And
Okay.
I feel like from just 5 years ago when I first came to MACC, I know a lot of the older folks didn't feel very close to the younger generation, but now I could see that gap
I
was kind
see.
of getting closer.
Okay. Okay. Got it.
Yeah, so I think another, when I said among other things, people are very flexible and they're very open and very
Right.
welcoming. And I think
Okay.
very, very teachable. I think that is a lot of our church members' strength.
Okay. Great. Thanks. Um, if you when you as you're looking for the pastor, the right pastor for MACC, what if you could, identify certain characteristics, certain things that you desire from that pastor? What would some of that be?
I think for me to be strong discernment.
Hmm.
I think, especially being Asian, sometimes you can be very passive aggressive.
Right.
And sometimes it's hard to, try to, save face, be nice, and not hurt feelings. But sometimes that's why we need to have a strong pastor with a good discernment and strong leadership team
Hmm.
to, because discernment is not obviously, we have a lot of smart people here. It's not knowing between right and wrong, but it's really between right and almost right, or sometimes almost right versus almost right. And it's
Right.
really
Right.
hard to make that kind of decisions.
Right.
So I think for me, it's really important to have a pastor that can go to for spiritual guidance and advisors and when I'm at a point where I don't really know what's the best thing to do under the circumstance and kind of point me into the right direction and be
Right.
able to help me spiritually in my walk.
Okay. Thank you.
I think for me, and I'm one of the newer people to the church,
Hmm.
this notion that you had mentioned earlier about casting responsibility and the sense of like getting that discernment and vision from God and from Jesus, I
Hmm.
think is a unique issue in Marin. We were originally from Seattle, and
Okay.
so what we're finding is that it's the Bay Area, so it's highly successful people
Right.
with a lot of money, a lot of disposable income, and there are at times other priorities. And to be a church in sort of the middle of that, I think is a challenge. It's like I think
Right.
at least from my perspective,
Right.
we're still trying to find identity and where we belong. And so
Right.
It's been great having MACC because of the Asian focus.
Right.
But in that sense, it's like like hearing that you were in Petaluma. I know there are other Asians like in the area,
Yeah.
yet I
I
don't know
know.
why they're not coming to like MACC. There's so many people that we meet in
Yeah.
like Petaluma and Vallejo, and they're like,
Yeah. Right.
they're looking for an Asian church,
Right. Right. Right.
and like,
Far and few
well, we
between.
have one in Marin, but
Yeah.
nobody comes, and so
Right. 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 Okay. Mm. Right. 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 Hmm. Okay. Right. Okay. Okay. Thank you. If I noticed that you all were looking also to hire I think a family life pastor, I think it was. Is that something that you're looking for? Like, is there somebody leading the children's ministry, and like, are they all volunteer led? Some of the education ministries. Um, how's that going along, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, we had a
Um, I, among other volunteers, are running the children ministry and youth group.
Okay.
And right now,
Wow.
the interim pastor's wife is helping out with the youth group as well.
Wow. Okay. Okay. So are you all in the midst of looking for a family life pastor as well? Is that put on pause? I don't know if that you're allowed to say or not.
well, that's yeah, we're allowed to say it.
Okay.
That's back up in the leadership team again. Um, there's I guess there's several issues. Um, Number one, it's very hard to just get a youth worker.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, extremely hard.
Hmm.
We had the Golden Gate Baptist Seminary here,
Right. Right.
and
Yeah, and they're
when they
gone.
were in existence,
Yeah.
right, they're gone. But when they were in existence, we approached them, and we couldn't get any help there.
Hmm.
So what happened was that the family ministries pastor position was created. It was created to it was created to take care of the entire young people program for all the way from preschool up to and including high schoolers.
Okay.
So that particular position was that that particular pastor was supposed to take care of that, ministering to that. Plus the additional duties was added to 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 um, uh, to fill the duties. The additional duty was to minister to the parents of the young people, the youth.
Hmm.
Um, that is back up to the leadership team because there was an applicant that are more youth workers than a pastor, a family ministries pastor.
Okay.
So initially, the search team we wanted to work on the senior pastor first because that was a more important position to fill.
Right.
Although not having not taking care of the youth is not good either.
Right. Right.
But so in terms of the family ministries pastor, is I think the one major thing that the leadership team is really has always considered and still is considering is, remember I said that our the size of our Sunday attendance is around 70 or so.
Yes.
You know, usually you have to reach a stage of about 100 to 120 before you get another pastor
Hmm.
to, you know, so that's kind of what the leadership team is looking at.
I
I'm,
see.
I'm not saying that we're not going to have a family ministries pastor right away.
Right, right.
I'm
No, I
not saying
understand.
that, but
Right.
right now the search team has put the family ministries pastor position back into the leadership team.
I see.
But, you know, it's just too much for us to handle right now.
Right, right.
Um, so and then hopefully, you know, one of the things also is that, you know, if we can hire a senior pastor within a relative short amount of time, then the senior pastor could also help us help us formulate what we
Right,
should be doing.
right, right. That makes sense. Okay, great. Yeah, in terms of questions, that's only really all I had.
Oh man, you made our session overrun by a half an hour, Tim. I
It's probably
don't
that
know.
first question. I went way too long. I'm gonna examine that all night. I'll be like, man, I talked too much.
No, I no that no I no that was no I personally I enjoy hearing your first personally I enjoy hearing your first the answer to your first question,
Oh, thank you, thank you.
because I was not only listening to you, but I was also watching your face and your and how deeply you felt about, you know, what was going on and how God called you and everything else. So there's no problem. You know, I actually did manage to get it within an hour, if you didn't notice.
Awesome.
Anything else, Tim?
No, that's all. Thank you so much. It's, I really appreciate, just your following up with me and the opportunity. I'm really, really grateful, and, just open to seeing how God is going to move in this, and I'll be praying for you all, in your search and your discernment as well. But thank you so much just for being able to connect. It's always an honor to be able to connect with fellow believers, and, we have been trying to get back up north somehow, some way, but we're going to see what the Lord has. So, we'll see.
Yeah, I when I looked at your resume and everything, I assumed you were still I assumed that you were still in Petaluma, but I noticed that it's Pasadena, so it starts with a
Yeah.
P. So you can't blame me for that.
Oh,
But
absolutely.
anyway, yeah. Hey, Mason, before we let Tim off, could you just end this particular session with a short prayer, please?
Amen.
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 And thank you, Mason. Okay, Tim, we'll bid you adieu. Hey, thanks a
Okay,
lot.
absolutely. Take care. It's nice to
All
meet you
righty.
all.
Okay,
Bye.
bye. All right. Um, any comments? The first. Don't forget, the first interview is always the most impressive. But any comments?
Yeah, I liked a lot of his responses. I mean, he had a great way of sort of explaining, answering the questions. I think he had a good energy. I like the fact that he also has worship and then youth experience. So like if Mike needs a break or if we need a backup worship leader, he's also there. I like the fact that he had youth experience. I like the fact that you called it like education ministry. That's the first time I've really heard it sort of that way. So my overall feeling with the first candidate was good. He had good energy, smiled a lot, and I think he was self-aware because that first sort of response, I was like, wow, he's spending like 30 minutes going through it, and I think he noticed at the end he spent 30 minutes.
Yeah, no, that was okay. I was watching him. I says, you know, I wasn't too worried.
He answered a
I
lot of
think
the
I,
questions that we're gonna ask anyways.
yeah,
Yeah,
no, I, I,
yeah,
I,
yeah.
I, I knew that but on listening to him, so I've handled enough of these to know where to shortcut and where not to. Anything else? Is, is,
Um, yeah. Well, but then the fact that he knows it's his weakness and he can just come out and say it, I appreciate that honesty. Um, yeah, I like him. I liked all the answers that he gave us. It kind of feels like a nail in the head. Just, yeah.
I think despite he says like how he stresses a lot, I actually think that he has a lot of capacities because based on his experience of going from worship directly into preaching and then preaching every single Sunday, it sounds like he can handle a lot.
And he's watching 3 kids.
Right. And then he's old.
He's a full-time dad for 8, 7, and 17 months. He's hired.
Yeah.
Right.
Hmm.
And he kind of didn't he touch on that? Mason, do you recall when he mentioned that he had trouble as a hospital chaplain because he was, seeing all these terminally ill children, and so
yeah,
taking all of the emotion, and that was difficult for him.
yeah.
Right. Hmm.
Hmm.
Right.
Well, not very many people can handle um, that type of counseling. With cancer patients, especially with kids with cancer. I mean, it's very emotional. Very, uh, it just drains you emotionally. But as for me, I enjoyed watching him. I enjoyed what he said. Um, there were only two things I think that will that well that concerns me anyway. Number one is the reservist thing. Um, you know, he'd be out one weekend a month, and then they're required to go 2 weeks during the summer. So this is something that we've never faced before. A situation like this. And the thing, and then my follow-on question was, well, how long do you think you want to be a reservist? And he, right now it looks like this is. He considers this part of his ministry. You know, and actually, when I listened to some of his sermons, not the ones he gave us, but some of the sermons that I went online, I could see that he has a very strong patriotic sense of duty to the country. So I could see why it meant much to him to be able to minister to the Marines, at least, once every month, or whatever. So I think that we probably can discuss more about the reservist duty. The other thing also is, to me, and I could be wrong, and you guys can tell me I'm up a creek, but there are a couple of things that I look for a pastor. Number one is, he's got to be able to, in the pulpit, he's got to be able to keep his messages have got to be able not to turn people off. So, in terms of the pulpit ministry, that has to be there. However, the other thing also is we right now we do have a problem getting people into the leadership team. But some of it, I think some of it is, and this is where we kind of missed the boat the past couple of years, is discipleship and mentoring. He spoke about discipleship and mentoring. We need to have discipleship and mentoring to be able to develop the future leaders of this church, the leaders that will be able to step up into the leadership team and will be able to lead this church into the future 10, 20, 30 years from now. We need that, and we have problems doing that right now. And then the other thing is ownership of the church. I think that's a problem. How many there really want ownership of the church? So I asked them the thing. So that led to my follow-on question: is have you been in any situation where you have had to kind of handle that? And he really didn't answer that. And actually, I kind of suspected that because looking at his resume and everything else, he really hasn't had he really hasn't talked about discipleship much. He talked about what should happen, but I almost kind of wanted, well, what did you do? So that's my only concern right now with him. But like everything else, we went through this conference. We got 4 more to go. But let's keep an open let's keep an open ear, an open mind, and I really think that we really need to sit down, not at a video conference, but to sit down around the table and talk about what we really want to see as a pastor. Some of these things that we're talking about, and anyway, okay, it's 9:15. Uh, Anybody else?
Well, before we go, can I just want to confirm some things. So people okay scheduling Pastor Richard next week? Okay, so I'm going to try to schedule him for Tuesday. If he's not available, then I'm going to switch him with Pastor Kyle because he's available on Tuesday. It's one of those dates that he said he's available. So there's a possibility that I might switch those two dates. Yeah, I'll definitely follow up and just confirm with you. And another thing is, and I know I sent a couple of emails about modifying questions for Pastor Richard.
Yes, don't. Yeah. I'll tell you what. If you don't receive anything, I'll look at those. We have to modify some questions anyway. Okay.
I mean,
So
definitely we do, but I was hoping it might be better coming from, not from the leadership team, but might become better coming from Jimmy, Donnie, or Melly, and myself, just four of us working together, because he's been here for over 8 months, and definitely he has a lot close relationship with you and Mason, and there might be something that you're kind of got used to knowing already, knowledge already that we may not be relevant to you, but it may be relevant to the rest of us because we don't know him as well. So
that's fine. No,
yeah,
that's fine.
so I was thinking maybe it might be a good idea for the rest of us to start the question, and obviously you could always add and kind of run it through the whole group, make sure that we're
That's
okay with
fine.
it.
That's fine. That's fine.
What do you think, Jimmy, Donnie, Melanie?
That's a good idea.
Yeah, I mean, there's some frankly things on our current questions that I don't know them well enough to even have a sense of.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's still some good questions on our current list.
Yeah, that's why I said not totally different, but just slight
Right.
modification.
Right.
Yeah.
I think for the
Yeah.
sake of consistency, we should hear from him, like his responses to each of these questions that we've already asked other candidates.
Yeah, because some of these questions, I mean, I don't even know. I mean, you may know because he may have shared it with the leadership team because he's in the middle of discipling you guys. But we don't know that. We don't have that knowledge. So it'll be good for us to hear that.
Sure. No.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. No. Just that's fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. One thing is, I hope you realize I do have a close relationship to him, but I try to make myself as unbiased as I can. On
Human.
pardon me?
So we're human.
Yeah, I know that. While we're here, I've been I'm actually very out of commission right now. We're going to be my son's here right now. They arrived today, and we're going to be busy tomorrow visiting his grandmother, and then we're going to go to Tahoe on Sunday. We'll probably miss church. We'll be probably going to church in Davis, but we're going to miss. We decided we're going to miss church. We canceled the food and everything, and we won't be back. We probably will not be back sometime until next week, sometime, either Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday. I'm not sure yet. And then, however, the other thing that has hit me is that Elon's computer is pushing up daisies right now. It's completely dead. It just failed to ghost. And and when I come back, I'll have to retrieve the data and everything else that's in her computer and put it in another computer. So, I've been following the emails, and I know Jimmy was concerned about putting out something to the congregation, and he suggested maybe that he could write something up. If I could ask one of you guys to follow up, because I actually wanted to follow up with another informational sheet to the congregation about what we're doing, but I just don't have the time right now because of everything that's happening. So, Jimmy, is your offer still good?
Yeah, offer's still good. It may need to come from, so I could, just make something up, write it, and then it may need to come from, I don't know if the church wants it to come from leadership team. So I
No,
could
that's
write
fine.
it and then forward it.
That's fine. Why don't you write it? Why don't you write it up, and then maybe we can all take a cut at it,
Okay.
and then I will go signature it as the head chairman of the search team.
Okay.
I have no problems doing that. Right. Yeah. The only thing is I read somewhere about including the resumes and everything else. I'm a little bit kind of hesitant to do it right now until we finish at least this set of interviews, because once we get through this set of interviews, I think um, we will have candidates that we can announce to the congregation. I actually think that with these set of candidates, I actually think that we have a very good. I mean, God has provided somebody there within these set of candidates. I just feel confident in that. So the only thing I don't feel confident in is have I let the Holy Spirit touch me enough so that I know who the person is right away. That's the hardest part of this whole search. So, but yeah, I thank you guys. Thank you for putting up with me anyway. But so our next interview is on Monday,
It's Monday with
right?
Brian. So before we
What
go,
time?
I'd just like to, it's at 7 o'clock. All the other meetings is set up at 7 from now on. But
Okay.
before we go, I just want to make sure that we have the questions ready for Pastor Richard, possibly because he might be scheduled for Tuesday. Hey, Donnie, can you just kind of finalize on that questions for Pastor Richard specifically? And you just want to shoot it out to the group, and then Donnie and Melody, and we can kind of look into it.
Okay.
And then Mason and Melvin, when we're done, he can kind of add their questions on top of that as well.
So,
And that needs to be ready by end of Monday, in case we have Pastor Richard's schedule for Tuesday.
Okay. The next one is Brian.
Yes,
the
Monday.
interview on Tuesday because I won't be able to make Tuesday next week.
Okay.
But if you could record it, that would be really great.
Okay.
That's
For
it.
Brian, I don't see any reasons why we should change the questions, right? Agreed.
Yep.
Alrighty. One caveat, okay?